Hello.
Hey, Lorey, how are you?
Good. Can you see me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Can see you too.
Great, great.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So we should be some fun.
Yes, I've been working in the shop all day.
Yeah, I typed up some questions here.
Okay.
Just thought we'd chat for. I'm going to just turn this off for a second. It's recording. Hi Tim. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you, Lorey.
Good. Good. Welcome to our online Artfest chat.
Thank
And
you.
we're going to be talking with Timothy Hallam today, and from Grip and Stir, and we're going to see what all he's up to in his woodshop. Maybe he makes wonderful handcrafted items.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
So you make a lot of practical and useful items out of wood. What do you make? What all do you make?
Well, I've always been sort of motivated to make things that are useful immediately. So that's the first directive for me anyway, in making something. And the second thing is how something feels in your hand, because I make hand tools to be used by hand. And so smoothness is important. So sanding is a big part of my life. But I start off making kitchen tools, and those primarily can comprise what Gripster makes, or I make for Gripster. So anything from several different types of spatulas to salad tongs to small hand butter knives, or sometimes they're called spreaders, and charcuterie boards and chopping boards and various shapes and sizes, that sort of thing. But all things that you can use immediately in your kitchen.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I guess the actual design of the spoon and the tool is actually a pretty complicated process, I would think, to get the right curves and the right feel and the right handle. And how do you go about doing that part?
Well, it sort of started with some of the old tools that I have that belonged to my mother and my grandmother, who fortunately were passed down to me. And they primarily were a flat spatula, flat handle. And I still use them in my kitchen. A couple of the spoons that I have, in fact, are about 100 years old now, but I still use them. I decided I needed to feel them differently in my hand, and so I generally start in Illustrator and on the computer, and I draw the shape out that I like to the outline, and then once I've done that, I transfer that design to paper, and I take the paper and I trace it out to make just a basic blank shape, like you might buy a key blank before you cut it, that sort of thing.
Right.
And then having done that, I use that blank to actually draw on the piece of wood that I'm going to use, outline the shape. And so I will, excuse me, I'll take a piece of wood like this. I don't know if you can see it, but there are several shapes drawn on there, pre-shaped. And then use a bandsaw or a jigsaw to cut the actual shape out. So this is a raw piece, and then I use a sander to round the handle, and this one you can see is still square, and in some cases I'll take a different pieces of wood on either side and clamp them together to create a different wood above and below on the handle, just to give it a bit of visual variation.
Okay. Well, I just feel like if things are flat, then you all of a sudden you want to do, like if you have a spatula and it's going along and it's going to have a bend in it, that takes a pretty big wide piece of wood, right? It's like all of a sudden I'm just realizing that's a lot of wood in a piece.
Yes, yeah. As you can see, that's a fairly wide piece there, but yet the finished piece will be a fraction of that width, will be the working piece. But I need the depth to get a curve through it this way. It would be easy enough to make a flat spatula, but if you make a spatula or a butter knife or so with the curve to it, it allows you, when you're actually cooking and stirring things and turning food over inside of a skillet or a pan, a curve will help facilitate that.
Right, yeah. So I saw on your in your notes that you choose wood and you use a legacy cut board. What is that?
These are boards that I find from particularly a couple of places, a lumber mill mainly north of me here in Bowmanville, called the Tyrone Mill. Maybe some of the people watching this may have heard of the mill. It was founded in 1846 and is still running to this day. It's an amazing place. But he's got an awful lot of boards that were cut at that mill, water power cut, back in the 30s and 40s. And they've been sitting around and sitting around and sitting around. And some of them are woods that people don't normally use, like bird's eye maple, or butternut isn't used very much anymore, primarily because there was a moratorium on cutting butternut trees. And these boards have been sitting stacked in a shed, in several sheds, particularly at this one mill, since that time. So that is what I mean when I mean legacy cut. They still have the same saw blades and saw marks and stuff. They were cut by these enormous round blades, 50 and 60 years ago.
Oh, wow. So I guess if they've been sitting that long, they have to cure, and are they kiln? Is that what that termination is? That kiln dried? Is that what you call it?
Well, back in the day, they didn't do kiln drying. Back then, they just put them in these outdoor sheds, and I suppose hope that people would just come and buy. And in many cases, some of these old odds and sods woods weren't purchased, and so they just remained in the shed. And so kiln drying is often used for modern woods, but these particular ones have been sitting. They've been naturally drying for that period of time.
Right. So do you have a favorite kind of wood that you like to work with?
I do. I love working with cherry wood.
Ah.
I make most of everything I make is out of cherry. It's very sculptural and cuts easily. And on the spectrum of softwoods and hardwoods, cherry is on the lower end, the softer end of the hardwoods, but it remains a hardwood. So it's a wonderful tone to the wood and color. And I think from a kind of a peach red to a dark red to a medium sort of rouge color.
Oh, nice. And it's all your pieces are made with Canadian hardwood, is that right?
They are, yes. Yeah, maple and walnut and bird's eye maple, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I also noticed that if you wanted to buy something from you on your website or on the Artfest store, that you have a choice. You can buy birch, maple, cherry, and what's the other one? Is there four? Walnut, right?
Yeah.
What's the most popular? Or
I sell a lot of different types in person at shows like Artfest. Last year at the distillery, it was a great success, and I put out a variety of woods, and I suppose because I'm partial to cherry, I tend to market that one a little bit better, but I'm certainly open to whatever of those woods that it mentioned that I'm happy to make for people.
Yeah, well, I know I don't know if you saw our show when I talked to you the other day, but I actually have my spatula here.
Yes, that's cherry.
Love it. I use it every day. I mean, great. I mean, I love wooden tools myself, so I know they last forever, and they just get better and better.
They do. They pick up little nicks and things. I for instance, if I'm stirring with a spatula and there's some food on it and you bang it on the pot to get rid of it, you'll end up with some marks and things on it. But I don't mind that at all for myself personally, because that's some character building over time.
So interesting too in your bio. I mean, you have a quite a background. You've studied historical linguistics,
yes,
still photography and darkroom, printmaking, and enterprise IT.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
That's among your interests. And how do they play a role at all in the grip and stir business?
Well, my career right now is primarily in enterprise IT, and the fact that I can work with something that's made out of wood with my hands, out of a blank piece of wood, that sort of creation in a very manual sense is something that is completely opposite to what I do for my career. And so that's appealing to me because it's other. And I guess I started out in the humanities and moved to photo and studied photo at Ryerson many years ago, and now work in IT. It's a good broad range of things to have studied.
Yeah, man with many hats. I know that did take note that you take really good product photos.
Oh, thank you.
It's a very challenging thing to do. So you've really got it nailed down with that. Your photos are absolutely beautiful and great to show off on the Artfest website. It's easy to feature you. So you were mentioning that you're in Bowmanville. That's where your workshop is?
Yeah, yeah. I live here. My children go, well, I have two children. One's now in university, but they go to, my other goes to a school right nearby, a high school.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bowmanville's a nice area. So you must have a lot of people that collect your work, because I do find that you customers pick up a piece and come back and add to their collection.
Yes, I've had that happen occasionally. I've been at some other shows in Toronto, and somebody will come to me and say, "Hey, I was at your distillery show, and I bought this piece from you," and I'm so glad that they have, and they've come back to pick up a complimentary piece in the same wood or a different piece. Yeah,
Yeah, that's great, and that's what comes when when you're doing this for a while and you build your customer base and do shows. I mean, you sort of become well known, so, like a craft show kind of rock star, right?
well, I don't know if that's the case, but I certainly am appreciative when people remember me. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, what is it that you love doing about the shows in person and being in person at a show?
Well, it's funny. I work alone and solitary sense, and I really appreciate that. I'm able to focus and concentrate. The ability to concentrate on one thing is not something that we're able to do so much these days anymore. We're multitask like crazy, and I certainly do that during the week in my career. So it's nice to be able to focus on a single thing, and when you do that, you can run the risk of not socializing as much as you probably ought to. And it was a wonderful surprise to start attending shows and find out how engaging it can be to talk to complete strangers. And as you know, and I'm sure many of the people who have, or vendors who might be watching, you have to kind of be a salesman all the time. You have to be on at the show all the time. So I don't like to sit down. I stand all the time. And I put things in people's hands as I'm talking to them. And you need to sell what you're doing, and can't sort of sit back and wait for people to sort of pick things up. And so I discovered I love talking to people, much to my surprise. So it's been a real treat, and people are interested and engaged, and yeah, I'm delighted. It's a wonderful process to talk to people.
Yeah, it's a nice balance. I know whenever, when you get there, you set up and you arrive, and then all you have to do is worry about selling and talking to people. You don't have to worry about anything else. It's really it's almost like a little holiday. But
it is. Isn't that true? Yeah.
Yeah. So how are you finding it with right now, with the situation we're all in with the shows being canceled? How are you managing? Do you find it easy to sell your work online?
It's easy enough to present it and put it out there. Like you were saying, I have a little photo studio set up in the corner of my basement, where I can set up my lights and throw the product out and do a shot and get it up online and tweak the Etsy store and tweak my whatnot. My own website I wrote as well. So that's easy enough to do. But I think the things that I like about my pieces that I make is how they feel, and that's very hard to translate to an online audience. So, and there's an awful lot of people making kitchen tools. It's kind of a niche environment in which to present things. But if you go and search for charcuterie boards, you'll be flooded with images, and if you search for spatulas, you'll get an equal number. But it's feeling things and picking them up. So I discovered that being in person at a show is really the ideal scenario for what I do, where people can hold things in their hands.
Yeah. And also that's where, when you're out at the shows, that's where you're really building your clientele, and people remember you and they add to the collection. I think as somebody who's already purchased from you before and is one of your customers, and it's much easier for them to just say, hey, I want to add it onto my collection right now.
Indeed. And when you're in person, you can often provide a little backstory on where the wood came from. I had a supply of apple wood from my uncle's orchard in Montreal, and I made a whole bunch of pieces, and I was able to talk about the tree that it came from, and how my relationship is to go back and get this wood from my uncle. And it's nice when you buy something from somebody who's actually made the thing in front of you. You can have that immediate discussion about provenance, and I think that's added value to an in-person show.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're all missing the Artfest shows. I'm hoping that we're going to be back at shows soon. But meanwhile, we've got this great platform. We can talk to artists and help them sell, hopefully. So thanks for being on with us here, Tim. And make sure you can shop at Tim's website, which is gripandStir.com.
Just Gripster, actually.
Sorry,
Gripster.com.
Gripster.com. Sounds like you're a hipster gripster. And you can do that at his website, but also on the Artfest website. You can just go to our website, artfestontario.com, and you can read about Tim and see his work and get a chance to get to know him. So thanks so much for coming on board, and we'll see you soon. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oops, I just ended it. Whoops. Are you still there? Whoops, closed you off.